cards. So my name is Sunita and I am the verbal head at GMAT-Viz. The platform that you have seen or will see, or if you're going to ever try it out, has been made by me, the entire verbal platform. I have been in this prep industry for almost a decade now. And as you will again realize down the session, that I'm really very passionate about teaching. For me, if I have been able to teach even a small, teeny, weeny bit of thing to my student, I feel I have done my job. So I can promise all of you that after today's session, you guys will definitely go home with a lot of clarity about modifiers, okay? At the end of the session, I'm going to share the PDF of this session with you so that you can refer to that PDF as well. And I'm sure a lot of y'all are also thinking whether you're going to get the recording of this session later on or not. You will, all right? Usually it takes a couple of days. So I think that's clear. Hi, Meher. Hi, Arindam. Arindam, the duration of the session is 2 hours, okay? Usually it takes slightly more than that because we get kind of caught up in solving questions, all right? So let's get started, guys. Let me not waste time with... So let's quickly look at the modifiers. If you want to take notes of this, you can. I'm not going to go into details. When we talk about modifiers, what are modifiers? We all know they offer additional information about either the subject or the verb in a sentence. So if it's a subject, it would be a noun or pronoun. And if it is not a noun or pronoun, the modifier is modifying the verb. Other than that, one modifier can modify another modifier also. All right. So that's what modifiers do. Okay. And the entity that they are modifying, that is known as a modified entity. So in today's session, when I talk about modified entity and I talk about modifier, you should know what I'm referring to. Modifier is the additional information. Modified entity is that thing or person about which the modifier is giving additional information. Now, modifiers can be a single word modifier. We call them adjectives or adverbs, okay? A phrase can also act as a modifier, you know, and a complete clause with a subject verb pair can also be a modifier of the subject or the verb. Now, very clearly, now this is where you have to understand, because this is where the confusion starts. Modifiers can be of 3 types, guys. Only noun modifiers, that is modifiers which modify nouns but do not touch the verbs. Okay, if they are modifying the verb, then that is an error. Then you have modifiers which modify verbs but don't modify nouns. So if such a modifier is found modifying nouns, it's an error. And then the actual problem, you have common modifiers. Modifiers that can modify both nouns and verbs, and then you don't know what is modifying what, and you therefore are not able to pick the error. So this is what we are going to look at today mostly, all right? Common errors, common modifier errors. Let's quickly do a rundown on noun modifiers. If you don't already know it, guys, note it down so that you can use it, utilize it in today's session to gain the maximum from the session. Noun modifiers are modifiers that modify only nouns. What are they? ED verbals, words that end in ED. Now, you might say, ma'am, Sunita, ED words can also be a verb. Yes, they can be. But there is a trick which we teach in our course, how to recognize whether it's a verb or it's a verbal. Later on that. So the ED word, the words which end in EN, N, NT, you know, they are ED verbals and they modify only a noun. They cannot modify a verb, okay? Say, look at this sentence. The car abandoned near the church was sent to the scrap recycling plant. Here, the main sentence is the car was sent to the plant, and abandoned near the church actually gives me information about the car. Where was it abandoned? Near the church, okay? So a small trick is you ask yourself who abandoned, what abandoned. If you get a proper doer of the action, then abandoned is a verb. But if you don't get a doer of the action, then it's not a verb. All right, guys? Okay. Then you have the relative pronoun clauses which start with who, which, and that. And they give you additional information again only about nouns. Okay. So here is an example of the previous sentence converted to a relative pronoun clause sentence. The car that was abandoned near the church. Now this that was abandoned near the church is giving me additional information about the car. All right. And then we have noun phrases. Take a look at this sentence. Soft paraffin, comma, a byproduct of petroleum refining. Now this is a phrase. and it's a noun phrase. Typical structure is it starts with an article and ends in a noun, and it gives me more information about the noun it is touching. Okay, and then you have one word modifiers, what you call adjectives. All right. So the commonality among noun modifiers is they should be placed as close as possible to the noun they modify. You can't place an ed verbal 2 kilometers away from the word it is modifying. All right. So we will discuss that in today's session. I'm going a little fast because the purpose of the session is not to teach you modifiers, but to tell you what to do with those common errors. However, you do need to know a little bit about the modifiers in case there is any confusion regarding this. All clear, guys, so far? Let me quickly bring up a poll for this. So are you guys, hold on a second, guys. Are you guys all clear so far about the noun modifiers? These modifiers, as I've said again, so Jay Mishra, appositive is almost like a noun phrase. We did not want to, cram your brain with grammatical terms. So we use very simple terms. Okay. So it's easier to remember a noun phrase because the word noun is attached to it. You'll know, okay, it is something that modifies a noun. So a noun phrase is usually in appositives. Okay. Wonderful. I can see all of you are clear about it. So a small percentage of you have marked no. I don't know whether it's about the understanding or not. So I'll just reset the poll and ask. So far, whatever we have discussed, is it clear to you that these are the 4 kinds of modifiers which can modify only a noun? Are you clear about this portion? Great. Okay. Let me now quickly move forward so that I can bring you to the actual examples. Then you have the verb modifiers. These modifiers modify only verbs, and these are very few in number, you know. For example, these verb modifiers tell us about why the action happened, when it happened, where it happened, how it happened, to what degree it happened, and so on and so forth. All right. You have the TO2 verbals. All right. They modify verbs. They tell you the intention or the purpose behind verbs. For example, Marie opened the window to look at the moon in the sky. Here, to look is not the verb. Okay. And to look is not giving me additional information about the window. It's giving me information about why Marie opened the window. Okay. Then you have the one word adverbs, especially you would remember the ly words. No, they tell us the manner of the action. So how did Marie open the window? She opened it quickly. Now, so these are the ones which modify only the verb. Okay. Now, verb modifiers are different from noun modifiers in that these verb modifiers can be placed slightly far away. You know, you can see that also. To look is at a distance from opened. Quickly is away from opened. Unlike noun modifiers, which touch the noun they modify. Clear, guys? Now comes the problematic area, common modifiers. And this is where you should really sit up in your seats and pay attention, guys. Pay very close attention. Common modifiers are modifiers which can modify both, and the confusion arises because they modify both. So if you are not approaching your question stem correctly, you will miss the error. This is what we are going to discuss today. So what are these common modifiers? Prepositional phrases. Phrases which start with a preposition. They can modify your noun. They can modify your verb. So let's see how. Very quickly, if you look at this sentence, increase in the price of necessary goods. So the main sentence is the increase has caused a lot of suffering. What kind of increase? In the price of necessary goods. So that is a prepositional phrase. It is modifying the noun, the increase. As you can see, it is placed right next to that noun. Okay. On the other hand, look at this sentence. In order to resolve the debate, okay, this is telling me the reason why the teacher rapped loudly on the table. Now you will notice that when a prepositional phrase is modifying the verb, okay, in order to resolve the debate, why did the teacher rap? This is what, okay, you will notice that this also somehow modifies or agrees with the subject. This is true of most verb modifiers. While they are modifying the verb, they will also make sense with the subject when they are placed in front of the subject. So you can see prepositional phrase can modify a verb and a prepositional phrase can modify a noun. How will you know that? That is what we are going to learn today. You are going to learn how to diffuse the confusion as to, is the prepositional phrase modifying the noun? Is the prepositional modifying the verb? Okay. So let's move ahead. The next common modifier is flexible modifiers. Now I'm going to discuss in detail about flexible modifiers later on. Okay. But what you need to remember about flexible modifiers is, unlike other modifiers, they can be placed a little far away from the modified entity. Okay. Look at these two sentences, guys. Look at this sentence. Harry has graduated from Cambridge University with distinction in economics. All right, that's an independent clause. And after that, you have a structure which says an institution that is considered to be one of the best in the world. Clearly, this whole thing, this entire part is giving me more information about Cambridge University, although it's not placed next to it. So more about flexible modifiers later on, guys, and I'll show you how it can also modify verbs. The third common modifier is the ing verbals. Look at this sentence. Single words, they can be phrases, they can modify either nouns or verbs. Look at this sentence. The dancing birds. So here dancing is telling me what kind of birds. Entertain the crowd watching the show. So which crowd? That which was watching the show. So in both the cases, they are modifying nouns and they are placed next to the noun, either before or after it. All right. However, if you look at this sentence, the governor rejected the mercy plea. So here governor is the subject, rejected is the verb. What did the governor reject? The mercy plea of the murder convict. After that, you have a comma here. Notice this. And then you have this ing. Signaling authorities to take stern action against such a heinous crime. Now, what is this signaling modifying? It's not a verb, right? There is no helping verb here. We can't say the governor signaling authorities. That doesn't make sense. However, the signaling is telling us the manner in which the governor rejected the plea, or it is telling us what the governor did once the mercy plea was rejected. The outcome of the rejection is signaling. So this is the outcome of the verb. All right. And as you can see, the verb modifier can be placed far away from the verb. So a comma plus ing after a clause will always modify the nearest verb. Again, you can see the confusion, how it can arise. We will talk about that later, guys. You will also notice one thing, that the ing modifier, when it is modifying the verb, it will again make sense with the subject. Who is signaling? The governor. Who rejected? The governor. So while rejecting, the governor made that signal. All right. So the ing verbal are the third common modifier. So we have the prepositional phrase, then we have the flexible modifier, and then we have the ing verbal, which are common modifiers. Please note, guys, if an ing verbal modifies a verb, it will be preceded by a comma that separates the verbal from the previous clause. Okay, guys, all clear so far? All right, let me see. So Urvansh, that's the point about Arindam. Only verb modifiers? Yes, only two. So Urvansh, that is the let's say the speciality of flexible modifiers. Cambridge does not need to be placed right before the comma. Okay. So Sharan, ing verbal is modifying the verb in the last sentence. Okay. We will discuss more about it. Whenever you have a comma plus ing after a clause, the ing will always modify the verb. It's a verb modifier in that case. All right, Sharan, clear? Hi, Ellie. All right, so Arindam, Urvansh, Sharan and Ellie, I hope your queries are clear. And let me just once again quickly ask you guys if you have understood all of this. Shall we start solving the questions, guys? Yes, I can see all of you are ready. So the first of the mysteries that we are going to look at today, I call them the ED verbal dilemma. you know, understanding what that ed verbal is modifying. Is it a verb, ed verbal modifier? Is it a verb? What should it modify? What it can not modify? So these are some of the things that we are going to look at today. All right. And to clear this ed verbal dilemma, here is a question for you. It's an official question, guys. Get set, go. I'll give you exactly 2 minutes for this question. Your time starts now. And I'm going to mute myself in the meantime. Okay, I'm going to start counting. I'll count 5, guys, because there's a time lapse between my speaking and you being able to hear me. Please start putting in your polls. So, hi, Shagnik, I'll answer your question in a moment. In the meanwhile, let me quickly count 5. Here goes 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So, Shagnik, in that, okay, in that is a phrasal adverb. Okay, it's a phrase that modifies a verb. It means for the reason that. So wherever you need to point out for the reason that, you can use in that. It's more or less a replacement of because. All right. So depending on the rest of the structure of the sentence, mostly you can replace because with in that. All right. So I'm ending the poll, guys. As you can see, 8% of you have marked A, 65% of you have marked B, which means 65% of you were not able to spot the error. Yes, guys, B is not the answer. 12% of you marked C as the answer. None of you have gone for D. 14% of you believe it's E. So let's discuss what's really wrong here. Why did you miss the correct answer? Why did you choose B when B is not correct? So please perk up and pay attention, okay? While I'm discussing, don't put in any questions, guys, please. That's a request, because chances are your query will be resolved by the time I finish discussing. Once I finish discussing this question, I'll give you time to ask me questions about it, okay? Now, I am going to analyze this question using the GMAT whiz methodology. So what you're about to witness is what we teach on our portal, all right? You will find that we teach you to follow the meaning-based approach. Unlike any other prep institution, we don't just tell you follow the meaning-based approach. We actually teach you how to do it bit by bit. So follow the process, how I'm solving things, how I'm going about it, and you'll be able to understand what meaning-based approach really is. So here I go. Our first step in GMAT whiz methodology is understanding the intended meaning of the original sentence. Most of the time, students prefer to spend the least amount of time on the original sentence and maximum time over the answer choices. We believe that is counterproductive. Always make sure you have understood the original sentence properly. Then eliminating the answer choices become very, very smooth and very, very easy. Let's see how. Now, when we read our sentences, we don't read all the sentences in one shot. We always break our sentences at certain checkpoints, which again, the GMAT whiz student learns on the portal. All right. And then we understand the meaning of the sentence of that small portion. Then we move ahead. So here I will demonstrate that methodology. Teratomas, okay, let's call them T, are unusual forms of cancer. Okay, so this teratomas is my subject. Likely it's plural because we are saying are. So this is the verb, subject, verb, agree. Yes, guys, you might ask, well, that is not underlined. Why am I bothering about it? Please focus equally on the entire sentence, okay? Sometimes the ununderlined part is the guide to the underlined part. So don't neglect it. Let me come back. So we're talking about something called teratomas. They are strange kinds of cancer, all right? Let me see what will come up next. This is a complete clause here. Because, all right, so right away I noticed that the rest of the sentence is going to tell me why the teratomas are unusual. So this because part is basically going to modify the verb. Because always modifies a verb, guys. Because they, now who is this they? They is a pronoun. They is likely talking about these, sorry guys, my bad. They is likely talking about these teratomas. So teratomas are unusual forms of cancer because teratomas are composed of tissues. That doesn't really make sense. I'm sure they will talk more about these tissues. So something is wrong with the tissues with which these teratomas are composed. Let me see what they are. They are composed of tissues such as tooth and bone. Now my brain is like thinking, are the teratomas composed of tooth and bone? No. That doesn't make sense. Okay, so what can make sense is the type of tissues which are found in tooth and bone. Perhaps these teratomas are also made of similar kinds of tissues, because the teratomas can't be made up of tooth and bone, right? Right. Okay. So I'm saying teratomas are unusual because they are composed of tissues which are found in tooth and bone, not normally found. Now, when you look at not normally found, now found, is it a verb or a verbal, guys? Is it a verb or a verbal? Come on, answer me in the chat box. Is it a verb or a verbal? Not normally is modifying found. Found, is it a verb or a verbal? Go ahead, guys. Okay, Julia. Hi, Julia. So if you're the same Julia, good to see you back. Okay, all of you, Arindam, Sumit, Vipal, Vibhor, Ritika, Avijit, Ekra, Kabir, Meher, all of you believe it's a verbal. Anirudh believes it's a verb. Rajavi, hi Rajavi, you also believe it's a verbal. How do we find it? Hi, Yasmin believes it's a verbal. Ellie believes it's a verbal. Now I'm just going to quickly show you a small trick here, guys. Okay, ask the question what, or you can ask who if there is a person, plus the word that you think is a verbal or a verb. So here it is found, right? Okay, what found or who found? Are you getting a logical subject? Are you getting a logical subject, guys? Ask yourself, is there a doer of the action found? No. We can't say that the bone found. We can't say the tooth found. We can't say the tissues found something. We can't say the teratomas found something. So clearly, it is not a verb, it's a verbal. Now, found is what we call the ed verbal. Okay? The ed form of the verb. Okay? Find, found, found. All right? Now, found, because it's an ed verbal, it will, so ed verbals, okay, this is the takeaway here, always modify nearest. Remember, it's only a noun modifier. So it will either modify the nearest noun or the noun phrase if there is a noun phrase. The nearest noun is what? Tooth and bone. So what this sentence is trying to say is the tooth and bone are not found in the organ. Does that even make sense, guys? What do you think we are trying to say? We are trying to say teratomas are unusual because teratomas are composed of certain kinds of tissues. What are these tissues? They are tissues which are also found in tooth and bone. And are we trying to say that tooth and bone is not found in the organ? No. Probably we are trying to say that these kind of tissues, the kind of tissues that are found in tooth and bone, those kind of tissues are not normally found in the organ in which the tumor appears, and that is why teratomas are unusual forms of cancer. So the intended meaning, again, the intended meaning is like a 99% probability. That 1% could be a difference, which you will discover when you move to the answer choice elimination stage. So intended meaning, notice how I am taking out the intended meaning in small segments. Teratomas are unusual forms of cancer. Yes. The reason they are unusual is they are composed of tissues such as tooth and bone. So tooth and bone is an example of the tissues. These tissues are not normally found in the organ in which the tumor appears. That's step 1 of GMAT Whiz methodology for SC. Yes, Rajvi, I remember names. So Vibhor, Rajvi, Julia, some of the names I remember so clearly. Urvansh, just let me answer Urvansh. Urvansh, are you able to hear me now? If not, please rejoin because it could be something to do with your link out there on network. Let me just type him. Please rejoin. So, guys, are you all clear with this explanation? You can answer me in the chat box, guys. Urvansh, if you can't hear me, please rejoin. I mean, I've sent you a message also. Yes, guys, are you clear? Or if you have any queries, you can ask now. Wonderful. I don't see any queries. Okay. Wonderful. Great. So now that you see how this, how shall I say, the methodology that a GMAT Viz student uses is very different from a normal student. You're welcome, Urvansh. So this methodology is something that is going to get you through not just simple sentences, but difficult sentences and any confusion. You just now saw how we solved the ED verbal dilemma, right? 65% of you marked B as the answer. It's not correct. So yes, Arindam, I'll explain found concept here quickly. Found here is not a verb, okay? How do we know that? I've already given you that tip. You ask the question, what found, who found, do you get a logical subject for it? Do you get somebody who did that found? No. So found is a verbal and we call it the ED verbal. Now the issue is ED verbals modify only nouns, okay? And they modify the nearest noun or nearest phrase. So the nearest noun or noun phrase that we have next to found is tooth and bone, which basically means the tooth and bone are not normally found. Okay. Arindam, the concept of passive form doesn't arise because it's not a verb. It's not a verb. Even if it was in the passive form, there would be a helping verb. All right. So it is not a verb. So what we are saying here in the original sentence is the tooth and bone not normally found in the organ. And that is not correct. What the intended meaning was the kind of tissues that are found in tooth and bone. Those kind of tissues are not normally found. But because of the placement of found, which by the way we can't change because it is not underlined, is wrong. So you see, one of the most common errors that you face is this. The ED verbal dilemma, as I put it. Okay. Glad you got that, Arindam. So now let me move to the answer choice elimination. A is wrong, as I've already pointed out to you, such as tooth and bone. Okay. Found modifies this, and this is wrong. Let's move to B, which is incorrect now. Here, one more concept that comes in is the use of this relative pronoun clause that are not normally found. So let's place it in the original sentence. Okay. All right. So this here, this phrase is a relative pronoun clause. Okay. Relative pronoun clause. We know it's a clause because it starts with a that, you have a verb, and this that. What is this that going to refer? What is it going to refer to? Technically speaking, it can refer to tooth and bone. It can also cross this small phrase and refer to tissues. So the problem is it could refer to both, and both, and I'm not a science student. Maybe I don't know where tooth and bone are found. So it could mean the tooth and bone that are not found. It could mean the tissues that are not found. So this creates an ambiguity, guys. And ambiguity is an error. Okay. So this construction doesn't work. The that can refer to tooth and bone. So it would ultimately mean the same thing, that the tooth and bone are not found. You cannot just kind of ignore tooth and bone and straight away jump to tissues. The problem is it can refer to both. Refer to both. And it's not clear to us. All right. Any queries on this? Because 65% of you marked this. Hi, Sunny. 65% of you mark this, guys. So let me ask all of you who mark this as the correct answer. Are you clear why B is incorrect, guys? Are you clear why B is incorrect? Again, let me end the poll. Let me ask you the question. Are you clear why B is incorrect? So, Jay, tissues such as tooth and bone is not incorrect because such as is giving an example and you may place it in commas, you may not place it in commas. GMAT is not very clear on that issue. Yes, Kabir, illogical meaning error. So, Meher, found is an ED verbal. It cannot jump over a long distance to modify the noun teratomas, Meher, okay? All right, Yasmin, going back to A is a little difficult. It means going through the entire question. Please pay close attention. I'll repeat it. Don't worry. Relative pronouns can only jump, Arindam, relative pronouns can only jump small prepositional phrases or examples. Okay. So, Yasmin, I'm just going to quickly run through A. All right. Guys, we need to help out Yasmin a little bit here. So, Yasmin, not normally found, okay? Such as tooth and bone, not normally found, okay? My bad. Hold on a sec, guys. Let me say not found. So, found is an ED modifier, okay? An ED modifier or it's a noun modifier, all right? And it will always modify the nearest noun, okay? So, the nearest noun is tooth and bone, the noun phrase. So, it's like saying that tooth and bone are not normally found in the organ, and that is why teratomas are unusual. Doesn't make sense. There's no connection between why teratomas are unusual and tooth and bone not found in the organ. What we want to say is tissues that make up tooth and bone, those kind of tissues are not found. This is what we want to say. But this is not what this sentence is saying. Okay? So, Yasmin, is that clear? Lovedeep, you will have to be a little patient for the correct answer. All right. So, Urvansh, such as is used to give examples, not to show comparison. Like is used to show comparison. Yes. All right, great. So, let's move to C quickly. Over here, like is used for just now, as one of you was asking. Like is used for comparison. Although, to be very honest, I have come across some OG questions which have used like to give examples. Let's ignore that for the moment. So for the moment, we are going to keep C on hold, but let me tell you right away, C is actually incorrect because of that like. Okay. So this is incorrect. Let's move to D. In that, as I've told earlier, this is a phrase, okay, which means for the reason that, okay, and it is used instead of because. Now here in D we are talking about composition instead of composed of tissues. Let's see. In that their composition is not normally found. That totally distorts the meaning. And are we saying tissues such as tooth and bone is an example of composition? That is even more weird. So D is out. None of you mark D. Let's move ahead. Again, E, in that they are composed of tissues such as tooth and bone. Okay. Such as tooth and bone here is also an example. But you will see there's a comma and then we have tissues not normally found. Okay. Now, if you notice this is what we call a flexible modifier, which we will learn later on. But this phrase from here till here is modifying tissues. We are repeating the word tissues. If you remember the example of flexible modifier that I gave you, we had Cambridge University placed far away, but after the comma, we had an institution. So that an institution was referring to the Cambridge University. Here also the word tissues is repeated. Okay, it is repeated to clear, sorry, my handwriting because of this, to clear the ambiguity. So those of you who think the same words should never be repeated, please remember, if you want to remove the ambiguity, sometimes some repetitions have to take place. So the takeaway here is, guys, sorry guys, I'll come back to that. The takeaway I'm going to mention later on, but the takeaway was right there here, that ED verbals always modify the noun, and they always modify the nearest noun or the nearest noun phrase. They don't modify a verb. All right. So here the learning was they modify the nearest noun. Are we all clear, guys? In the meantime, before we move to the next question, there's a small announcement that I'd like to make. Yes, Aditya, it's a noun plus noun modifier. Perfect. So Girish, in GMAT, Girish has brought up a very important issue. Girish is saying that the correct answer is totally context driven and option B is deliberately placed as another trap. Absolutely, Girish. In GMAT, you will notice that you're tested on two things, the grammar and the communication. It's not just grammar. It's verbal reasoning for a reason, guys. Otherwise, they could simply have called it the English section. It's not that. Yes, Kabir. In B, there was an ambiguity because of that, and that is why E is correct. All the questions that we will be looking at today, we wore our 700 plus questions, okay? So guys, tomorrow we have these crash courses, all right? And these crash courses, as you can see the details, they take place over a period of 10 weeks. There are 25 sessions divided between verbal and quant. All the sessions take place on Saturday and Sunday only. Saturday 7 p.m. IST and 1:30 p.m. GMT if you're outside of India. All right. And these sessions are taken by our experts. All right. You will also get online access to our course along with the if you take up the crash course. All right. And with the round one so very near, 10 weeks is just the right amount of time that you have to make sure that you get there. All right. So Ritika says, I got confused between B and E, and this is one of the major issues I face. Well, Ritika, that's the whole purpose of this session. Guys, today's session is to clear up these dilemmas. So I hope this question cleared one dilemma that you normally face. All right. I hope you like the question. So Ritika, the help is very simple. Remember that the ED verbal will always modify the nearest noun. It will not modify a noun which is far away. It will not modify a verb. All right. Keep that in mind. So the moment you see an ED verbal, ask the question, what is this modifying? Is it clear? Is it not clear? So again, Sunny, that is a very common mistake. And I think GMAT knows that you will eliminate if you see a repetition and all that. So don't take my bottom line. I'll just tell you this much. Through my research and experience, I know that nothing should be taken for granted. Okay. So Joysha, the explanation for C was very simple. The word like is used to give comparisons and not examples. And that is why C is incorrect. All right, guys, I'm going to bring up the next question. Otherwise, we will just keep talking about this. So if you are one of the lucky ones, you will get a special prize that is probably going to be lower than that $349. So $349 gives you 25 live sessions. Each session is about 2 hours, two plus hours actually. All right. And you will also be getting access to the quant and the verbal course, which basically means access to the bank, question bank, and everything. All right, guys. The batch is starting from tomorrow. So if you really want to be a part of the batch, please get in touch. I'll give you the links. I'll share the links with you. Or you can go to gmatviz.com and over there you will get the link for crash course and you can add that to your cart. All right, guys. So you're welcome, Joyisha. Let me bring up the next question. Here it is. This is a question which I have made along with all the other GMAT with the entire section. All right, the verbal section. So let's hope you enjoy this question, guys. Go ahead. is short. Okay. So Girish, thank you for pointing that out. 2 is also underlined, which I saw was not properly understood in the slide. All right. Okay, guys. So I'm going to start my countdown. Please put in your polls. Here starts my countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. You're welcome, Girish. So Aditya, we have approximately, I think, if I remember correctly, 7 questions. So we will be discussing these 2 on ED verbals, then we have an ing, then we have flexible modifier, and then we have that and which. Okay, I'm going to end the polls now. All right. So I think, guys, tell me honestly, what I can see here is 17% of you have marked A, 13% of you have marked B, 57% of you have marked C, 6% have marked D, and 4% have marked E. Okay. Now, how many of y'all found that the understanding about ED verbal helped you solve this question? How many of y'all felt that the previous question that we discussed, how the ED verbal should be placed, how many of y'all felt that that question helped you solve this question? Okay. Some of you felt that that question helped you solve this question. Because I can see that a lot of you did get this question right. However, whether you got it right for the right reasons or not, we are yet to see. So wonderful. Let's get set, because one quick question. Based on toxicity and exposure risks, this is modifying what? Quickly, guys. In the chat boxes. Chat box. So my question, let me ask you. Based on toxicity, this is modifying what? What is it modifying? Quickly. I'll give you 20 seconds to type your answer. Arindam says pesticide. Let's see the others. What is that phrase starting with based on toxicity and exposure risks modifying? So Jay says it's modifying the action banned. Joysha says action of banning. Rajavi is saying it is modifying pesticides. Sumit is saying pesticides. Girish, pesticides. Deepak, toxic substances. Vibhor, ban. Okay, so I think Vibhor, you're referring to the action of banned and restricted. Sunny, supposedly it modifies pesticides. Very good, Sunny. Thank you for that. Sai says pesticides. Abhijit, pesticide. Yasmin, banned. So guys, please remember, and that's how we will start off, and what we discussed in the previous question. ED verbals cannot modify verbs, right? They can only modify nouns. So if I look at this sentence, based can only modify pesticides. But does it make sense? So you have to ask, does the modifier and the modified entity, ME is the modified entity and M is the modifier, do they agree logically? You have to ask yourself that. This is one of the golden rules that we teach at GMAT Whiz, guys. Okay, as Sunny put it, that based on toxicity can only modify these nouns here, because we know that the ED verbal can modify only nouns. But if you next apply the golden rules framework that we at GMAT Whiz use, does it make sense to say that the pesticides are based on exposure risk? No. The pesticides cannot be based on toxicity. The toxic substance cannot be based on toxicity. Something else, we are trying to say something else is based on toxicity. Something else is based on exposure risk. All right? Is it clear, guys, now? So Meher, Ikra, all right, Anirudh, Pooja, Abhijit, Sai, um, Deepak, Girish, Sumit, Rajavi, and Arindam. Are you guys clear? Let me reset the poll and ask you. Just hold on a minute, guys. Are you clear that based is supposedly modifying pesticide, and that is wrong because that doesn't make sense. Ideally, this based on something else is based on probably the action of banned or restricted. Okay, and we know based cannot be used because ed verbals cannot modify verbs. So this is again a typical modifier error that you will come across, guys. And let me quickly now analyze the sentence for you. Most of you have got this right, so that's not a point, but I wanted to understand whether you got it right for the right reason. If you marked the correct answer choice but you did not think about based as wrongly modifying pesticides, then this question is wasted for you. So what is based? I tell myself, okay, I have an ed verbal here, and then what is it modifying? Okay, this is modifying this, which is wrong. Okay, it doesn't make sense. As I pointed out earlier, modified entity and modifier do not agree logically. All right, that's why it's wrong. So I'm going to hold on to that thought. What is based on toxicity? Let me read on. These substances were either banned, okay, so banned here. So this whole thing is my subject, which is basically plural. Either banned or restricted. So I have two verbs here for the same subject, verb 1, verb 2. They were banned, okay. Toxic substances, I have a were, so this is definitely a verb, were banned or restricted by the EPA. EPA must be some organization which did the banning. And then now I'm going to try to connect it back to the previous part, to this part here. So now I'm thinking, okay, now I understand. The EPA must have banned these substances on the basis of toxicity. So whatever was the toxic level of the pesticides, on the basis of that level and on the basis of the exposure risk, the EPA must have banned these pesticides. That is what is the meaning. All right. So based on toxicity is wrong. It is wrongly modifying the verb. Okay. This is wrongly modifying the verb because ed verbals, ed cannot modify verbs. Okay. Even from far away. Let's read on. Which led. Now, which, this here we have another relative pronoun clause, RPC. What led to a significant decrease? Now, which is placed right next to EPA. So, are we saying the EPA led to a significant decrease in air and water pollution? No, EPA did not lead to a decrease. It is this ban and restriction. The outcome of that is that there was a significant decrease in air and water pollution level. So this is again wrongly modifying EPA. Okay. And remember, which cannot jump over the verbs to modify these substances. Which cannot jump over the two verbs to modify the noun. It can only modify the nearest noun, or it can modify a noun which is separated by a prepositional phrase, which is not the case. So intended meaning that I get is these substances were either banned or restricted by the EPA. The banning led to, they were banned on the basis of toxicity and exposure risks that they had. The banning led to a significant decrease in air and water pollution levels in the city. All right, clear? So most of you, as I said earlier, got it right. So let me see. Okay, Meher, my bad if I understood it wrong. So Anish, commas are a big, how shall I put it? Sometimes they are there, sometimes they are not there. So I first try to understand the meaning. Then only I try to think of a comma or not a comma. So even if the comma is not there after substances, that's okay because you're joining it with and. You're not introducing a new clause. All right. Usually we put a comma plus and after a clause. Okay, guys. So let me ask you the question. Is this, where is my poll gone? I can't see my poll. Yeah. Is this explanation clear, guys? Shall we move to the answer choice elimination? Is this clear? Okay, great. So as you can see, very quickly, A is incorrect, as we have already discussed. Let's move to B. B, same error is there. Based on toxicity, this is wrongly modifying pesticides, toxic substance, and contaminants. Let's see if any other errors are there. These were either banned or restricted by the EPA. Now, leading to is modifying same EPA, which is wrong. The EPA is not leading to the decrease. All right. So B is incorrect for that for two reasons. ING verbals, when they modify a noun, okay, there is no comma between the noun and that modifier usually. C says on the basis of toxicity and exposure risk. So this is converted from an ED verbal to a prepositional phrase, and we know that the prepositional phrase can modify the verb from a distance. Okay, so this is fine. So the ban or restriction was done on the basis of toxicity. Pesticides, blah blah blah, this is the subject, were either banned or restricted by the EPA, leading to, so this comma, okay, so you have a clause, plus you have a comma, plus you have the ing, okay, then the ing always modifies the nearest verb. So what is the nearest verb here? Banned or restricted. So the banned or restricted, the outcome of banned or restriction was increase in air and pollution levels. Okay, so C is correct, guys. C is the right answer. Most of you got that right. 57% of you got it right, and I hope it is right for the right reasons. So Carla is saying if the sentence started with based on their toxicity and risks, it should also make sense, Carla. Are the pesticides based on their toxicity? It still wouldn't make sense. Okay. So Girish, always be, see, for me, the commas should make sense. There should be a necessity for the commas. You are saying you read in the OG that the comma would usually come if the predicate comes before the main clause. That is to separate the predicate from the clause, but that is not the only reason why the comma comes. All right. You need a comma, Girish, when you need to separate segments. Just keep that as a pointer. If you don't need to separate segments, if the answer, the meaning is clear, that's okay. If you try to go into the logic of commas, it's a long, long process. So Sunny, I have seen both versions. I have seen commas there. I have seen commas not there. But I do know this. If you are joining three entities in a list, let's say X, Y, and Z, then X, comma, Y, and Z. All right. You don't need a comma after before that and, unless and until you are joining clauses. So please do not think about, if the comma is not there before leading, it will be modifying EPA. We will come to that, Rajavi. The ing verbal, we are going to discuss that just after this, okay? So guys, are we all clear? Wonderful. Let's quickly eliminate D. Although D uses this correctly, this is correct, sorry. All right. This is subjects were banned or restricted by the EPA and led to. Now led here is a verb, okay? Ask yourself, what is the subject? What is the subject? So we know that the subject has to be this only, right? Subject one, subject is this. This is verb 1. This is verb 2, and led becomes verb 3. So you are saying pesticides led to significant decrease in air, which is wrong. What is the subject? This. So this means this led to decrease. No. Illogical. So subject verb pair do not agree logically. One of our another golden rules. D is out, guys. Let's move to E. You can take a look at this in the meantime. Sai, you can say it's modifying the clause, but if the clause has more than one verb, it will always modify the nearest verb. Just keep that in mind. You can have more than one verb in the clause. All right. So I have an example in the question that is going to come up later, where I will discuss this also. Okay, guys. Again, I'll repeat, Aditya, all the questions are 700 plus level. All right. Yes, Rajavi, in case the comma is not there before leading in C, it would be wrong. Okay, guys, so let's look at E. E, we are back to based. So this again is wrong. And then we are saying contaminants which were either banned or restricted by the EPA led to. So basically, you're again saying this, if you remove, we are basically saying pesticides, toxic substances, and contaminants led to decrease in air and water pollution. That doesn't make sense. And that is also out. So guys, I hope it is clear to you the takeaways, the two takeaways that we had. I'm going to summarize the takeaways at the end of the session also. But for the time being, we have learned that ED verbals always modify the nearest noun or the nearest noun phrase. Okay. We have also learned that when you see an ED verbal, please check whether it is modifying the noun or the verb. If it is modifying the verb, you know that it should not be modifying the verb, and that is an error. Clear, guys? Next, we move on to the ing verbal confusion. So we've solved one dilemma that is to do with ed verbals, the most common dilemmas. Now we are going to look at the ing verbal confusion. Here is a question for you guys. All the best. Aditya, which can modify plural entities only if the plural entities are joined by and or some other such conjunction. Say, for example, if I am saying tooth and bone which, then it can modify both. All right. It is not modifying the subject, Shagnik, it is the verb. Okay, led to is acting as a verb. Which is modifying the subject, led to is acting as a verb. I'm going a little fast, Shagnik, because we have lots of questions to cover and we are already a little late on time. So, Shagnik, is that clear? Okay. The construction was pesticides, which something, something, something led to. So, basically, we are saying pesticides led to. All right, guys, you have your 2 minutes. All right, guys, your time is up. So I'm going to start counting. I'll count 10 this time because it's a long sentence and I'm sure you guys are still making up your mind. So here goes my countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So I'm going to end the poll now, guys. Please make sure that you have put in your polls. Now, a small request before I start discussing this question. It is a long sentence, guys. And later on, if you ask me queries about it, it might be very difficult to again do the whole explanation. So when I'm explaining now, please try to be a little alert to the explanation. All right. I'll give you a chance to ask questions once we are done with the explanation, but try to at least keep up with the explanations. Okay. All right. 11% of you have chosen A. You believe the original sentence is correct as it is. 4% of you believe it's B. 46% of you believe it's C. Okay. 27% of you believe it's D. And 9% of you believe it's E. Majority of you have got this question wrong, guys. So let's see what's the correct answer and why it is the correct answer and why the answer that you have chosen is not correct. So let's look at the ing verbal. All right. Now, just before I go into this question, let me quickly tell you once again, remind you rather, ing verbal, okay, ing form of the word, when it is not preceded by a helping verb, it is not a verb. So if I say is incorporating, it's a verb. But if I only say incorporating, it is not a verb. That I think all of you already know. Now, if you look at this ing verbal, it can modify a verb. It can also modify a noun. All right. And the difference is usually that if it is modifying a noun, it will be placed close to the noun. If it is modifying a verb, it can be placed far away from the verb. And again, in usual structure, if it modifies the noun, it is not separated from the noun by a comma. If it is modifying a verb, it is usually found at the end of the clause, separated by a comma. Okay. With that, let's now discuss this question and see where it takes us. So please follow very carefully. I'm going to go a little slow. Chinese public buildings. Okay. Now, we are talking about buildings here. Erected under a construction code of Sung dynasty. Now, first of all, I need to ask myself, this erected, is it a verb? So again, my question, verb or a verbal? And if I ask the question, what erected or who erected, okay, what erected or who erected, the answer will not be logical. The answer that comes is buildings erected. But did the buildings perform the action of erected? No. So erected under the construction code or whatever, this is basically an ed verbal for buildings. Okay. So this entire thing is modifying buildings. So I'm going to ignore that for a moment. Chinese public buildings, okay, what about them? Have withstood. So have withstood is my verb. It's present perfect. Now I'm not going to discuss present perfect, guys, but just understand when we are doing the analysis, we will always talk about the verb tense also. So these buildings, they have kind of stood the earthquakes well. They have not suffered. All right. Well is an adverb, guys. It modifies the verb have withstood. Okay. Remember, well is an adverb. It modifies the verb. Okay. How are you doing? I am doing well. Good modifies a noun. All right. How are you? I am good. When I'm talking about I. All right. So have withstood earthquakes well. So this is an independent clause so far. These Chinese buildings, they have kind of tolerated to you, for want of a better word, earthquakes well, because, all right, so because again is going to give me a reason behind withstood. What is the reason? Let's see. The white cedar. Okay, so if you already know, white cedar is a kind of wood. If you don't know, just think it's something. The white cedar used. Now clearly used here is again an ed verbal. Because again, if I ask the question, what used? The cedar did not use anything. So the subject is cedar and has is the verb. The white cedar used means used where? Probably used in these buildings. What else? So we're talking about something, some material used in this building. That material has 4 times the tensile strength of steel. Okay. So what this tells us is the buildings have withstood the earthquakes well because the material used is strong. All right. 4 times, it has got 4 times the tensile strength of steel. And, oh, so they are going to give us another reason maybe. The timber frame. All right. So that means timber frame is probably another material. Now, some of you may have confused timber frame to be a part of the previous clause. I mean, some of you might have thought the white cedar has 4 times the strength of steel and timber frame. So does it make sense to say strength of steel and timber frame? Does it make sense, guys? Come on. Does it make sense to say that the cedar has the strength of steel and timber frame? Won't it be strength of steel and strength of timber frame, or strength of steel and that of timber frame, if that was the case? But that is not the case. All right. So please understand here, it is illogical to read timber frame along with strength of steel. All right. And some of you were talking about commas earlier. Notice how there is no comma before and. All right. There is no comma there. But still, it's a new clause. So Yasmin, I think it only froze for you because the others are saying no. I hope it's fine for you now. So great, guys. Most of you agree that timber frame is not to be added to strength of steel and timber frame. We are not talking about strength of timber frame. We are only talking about strength of steel. Timber frame is a new clause altogether. How will you know? Ask the question. Does it make sense to say white cedar has the strength of steel and timber? No, na? Okay. So let's move on. This was the tricky part. And the timber frame. All right. What about the timber frame? Now here I have in commas. If you see, this is called a non-essential modifier, and non-essential modifiers are placed within commas, and you can think of them as information within brackets. What you're really saying is the timber frame is flexible. So you're saying the white cedar has the strength of steel and timber frame is flexible. These are the two reasons, okay, has strength of steel. So white cedar has strength of steel, timber frame is flexible. Description about the timber frame is what can incorporate joint and nails? The frame. The frame will have joints. The frame will have nails. So the frame has many joints and therefore maybe it can withstand the earthquake well. If the earthquake is shaking the building and if the timber frame is flexible, that means it has many joints. It will not break. It will just bend. All right. That's the way I do the meaning here. So the sentence is correct as it is. You might ask, ma'am, there is a comma here. Well, the comma is not just here. The comma is not at the end of a clause, guys. Is there a clause here? Is there a clause here? No. So incorporating is modifying timber frame. All right. The clause is timber frame is flexible and incorporating is fitted in between the clause. So it is modifying the noun that is nearest to it. So go by the logic, guys, not by rules and regulations only. What we're trying to say is Chinese public buildings, okay, these buildings have withstood, that's the main information, earthquakes well. The reasons are the white cedar that has been, sorry guys, that has been used has the tensile strength of steel. The timber frame of the building is flexible as it has many joints and few nails. Okay. Clear, guys? Absolutely clear or not? Tell me. Shashank, the repetition of words is avoided if there is no ambiguity. If there is any ambiguity, the words will be repeated. Okay. So let me open the poll and ask you guys. Are you clear about this? Any queries? Please ask now. Because if we move on, then again coming back to A will be difficult, guys. All this we teach at GMAT with how to read the sentence, where to break it, what kind of questions to ask, what are the kind of errors you should look for. All that is already taught. You know, the golden rules framework that I was mentioning, this method of asking who or what plus the verbal, all of that is taught so that you can very smoothly, very easily understand the intended meaning. Great, guys. So let me move to the next, so A is correct. Very small percent of you marked A, guys. And I think that was because of the comma plus ing. So A is the right answer. Let's look at how the other answers choices are incorrect, especially C. because majority of you, 46% of you marked C. So till used, it's the same. In them, now you have to ask yourself, do we need this? If you don't need it, probably it is redundant. Okay. Used has 4 times the tensile strength of steel. If you say strength of steel, it means strength that steel has, right? The of is already telling you has. So this has is redundant. You don't need it. The of is already okay. So that is the error in B. We don't need the in them. And even if the in them is allowed, okay, the strength of steel has is incorrect. Clear? So B is out. Very small percent of you chose B. C, that was used. Now this is incorrect. Why? It is still in use because the buildings are still standing. If you say that was used, the implication is the white cedar is no longer in use. Okay. All right. It is still in use. Therefore, saying was used is incorrect. Again, in them, maybe there, may not be. There has 4 times the tensile strength steel has here because the off is not there. So this has is fine. And the timber frame incorporating is fine. But C is incorrect because of that was used. All right. So that was the reason why C was incorrect, guys. Anybody who has any questions about C? 46% of you marked it. Can you see why it is incorrect, guys? Can you see why C is incorrect? In them is also redundant, Julia, but I wouldn't say grammatically it's really wrong. And logically, so pronouns in GMAT have to be taken with a pinch of salt, Julia. As long as there is no ambiguity, like you wouldn't say that the cedar is used in the earthquakes, right? It makes more sense to say the cedar is used in the buildings. So Shashank, when the building was constructed, the cedar was used at that time. It is still in use. So something which is still being, if it is still being used, we can never use the simple past tense for that. Simple past tense is used for something which is done and over, no longer exists. Yes, Kabir, it is wrong because mostly because of the verb. All right. Any other queries, guys? So Julia, Shashank, Kabir, I hope it's clear to you. I'm going to move now to the next option. Here we go. Same logic here, same problem here. That was used is wrong. Has 4 times as much tensile strength as steel. This is fine. All right. It has 4 times as much tensile, 4 times as much strength as steel. Has should be here. Of course, even if you don't write that, it's all right. If you really try to understand, we are saying the white cedar has 4 times as much strength as steel. Has actually required. Problem starts here. The timber frame incorporates. Now, incorporates is a verb. Okay. Incorporates, and then if you go ahead, there is a comma, and then you still have the is flexible. Okay. So, which means you have verb 1, you have verb 2, but you have no connector, no and in between, nothing. We cannot connect 2 verbs like that. Timber frame incorporates is flexible. Wrong. So that's majorly the error in D. A lot of you also marked D. Any queries on D here, guys? Any questions you need to ask for D? Okay, I don't see any questions. Great. Let's look at E. That was used is wrong. Has 4 times the tensile strength steel. Does is wrong. It's not that we are talking about a doing word. Has is possession. So this is does is a wrong replacement of has. Okay. And this problem I've just discussed is wrong. Okay. Because subject, verb 1, comma, verb 2. not done. So E is out. Okay. Any questions here? I don't see any questions, guys. So yes, shall we move to the next question, guys? Shall we move to the next question? Shall we move to the next question? Are you game for it? Wonderful. Which choice do you want? This question? No, Meher, we cannot consider it that it was only used during the construction. It is still being used. It is still in use. Okay, Meher? So we cannot say that it was used. It's incorrect. Okay, all right. Arindam, please understand, in grammar, okay, simple past is only used when the action is over, when the effect of the action is also over. Now, the wood was used, the cedar wood was used in the past, yes, but the cedar wood, if you really remove the cement and everything, you will still find the cedar wood. It is still being used. So I can't use was used for that. All right. So Julia, Sudeep, the answer is A. Julia, I'm going to be real quick about it. I'll go back to the original slide. Here it is. So the correct answer was A. I'll quickly mark out the areas. In them is wrong. Okay, has is wrong. That was used is wrong. In them is wrong. Okay. Then that was used wrong. Incorporates wrong. Incorporates wrong. That was used wrong. All right. So Julia, I hope that's clear. Aditya, I'm trying to move faster, but the point is I want everybody to learn something or the other, all right? And that is why answering the query is important. Please be a little patient, Aditya. I know you want to just solve the questions and move on and learn the takeaways. But I think we all need to be a little patient. All right? So next question coming up. There it is, guys. All right, guys. Start putting in your polls because I'm going to quickly do the 5 countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You know what I noticed? Some of you had very quickly marked the answer choice. Funnily, it was wrong. It was just 30 seconds of putting up the question and I saw the answer. And I thought to myself, how can anybody possibly solve this question in 30 seconds? Maybe you've done that question earlier. In that case, you should mark the correct answer. But no, the answer was not correct also. If you are reading the sentence too fast, guys, chances of you making a mistake is 200%. Trust me on that. I've seen enough number of times that this particular thing happening. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So, such sentences where only a small portion is underlined, you have to become extra cautious about the non-underlined portion. Understanding the structure of such sentences is very important. 20% of you believe A is correct. 30% believe B is correct. 32% believe C is correct. 7% believe D is correct. And 10% believe E is correct. Let's see. Now, again, this question is very, very, very tricky, huh? So pay very close attention, guys. This question involves both ED verbal and ING verbal. So pay very close attention. Here goes. Scientists have recently discovered something, okay? So here I have my subject, scientists. I have discovered, which is my verb, subject verb pair agree logically. What have they discovered? What could be, so there is a possibility, the largest and oldest living organism on Earth. Now, if I really look at this part, this whole thing, this is an independent clause, right? The entire thing could be written separately as a complete sentence. Okay. So I know what is going to follow will either be a subordinate clause because there is no semicolon after that, or it is going to be some other kind of modifier, maybe a phrase or something like that. But it will not be an independent clause. All right. So this is the structural part that I'm noticing here. All right. So let's see what they are going to talk about. A giant fungus. So I'm saying, oh, it is the organism that the scientists have discovered is probably a giant fungus. That, okay. So since this is a relative pronoun clause, this whole thing is a relative pronoun clause, right? This giant fungus is, okay, an interwoven filigree. Filigree basically means a network. So it's a network. And what is it made up of? Mushrooms and tentacles. All right. So, fine. So basically, I'm saying scientists have discovered an organism. The organism is a giant fungus. This giant fungus is a network of mushrooms and tentacles. Clear so far, guys? Are you clear so far? All of you. So this is now, we haven't come to that part yet, but this is typically a flexible modifier. The portion from giant fungus till tentacles is a flexible modifier, and it is modifying the noun organism that is there in the clause. So typical structure of a flexible modifier is a noun plus the noun modifier. Noun is giant fungus, and that is an interwoven portion is a noun modifier. Great. Wonderful. All of you are clear on that. All right. Let me now move ahead. After this, we have spawned by. Now, spawned by, if you don't know the meaning of spawned, doesn't matter. If you know that spawned means produced by. All right. Produced, so something is produced by a single spore, okay, some 10,000 years ago. So I'm thinking, okay, this living organism, it is the oldest living organism. So which organism? The giant fungus. What is this giant fungus? It is a network of mushrooms and tentacles. And then I have spawned by. Now I'm thinking, spawned by, is it a verb or a verbal? So same question, verb or verbal? Verb or verbal, guys? Spawned. Come on. Back to the chat box. Is spawned a verb or a verbal? Quickly ask the question that I've showed you and give me the answer. Is it a verb or is it a verbal? Is it a verb or is it a verbal? All right. So Julia, Vipal, Arindam, Yasmin, Abhijit. Let me see who else. Ekra. Who else thinks it's a verbal? All of you think it's a verbal. Come on. Rajavi, Hiranmai, Sumit. Perfect, guys. All of you agree, Carla. All of you agree, Shashank, Sunny, that it's a verbal. Great. We don't have any doer of the action. So now the next question is, what is it modifying, guys? You have already learned about ed verbals, right? Yes, Anirudh. What is it modifying? Absolutely, Girish. Who or what spawned doesn't make sense. Yes, Meher. Both spawned and that are modifying giant fungus. But Kabir, remember what we discussed? Ed verbals can modify the nearest noun or the nearest noun phrase. Is giant fungus close to spawned by? No. So guys, once again, what is spawned modifying? Quickly. In the chat box. What is spawned modifying? So Sunny, remember, spawned by ed verbal will either modify the nearest noun or it will modify the entire noun phrase. So it is referring to the whole thing. Okay. What is spawned by a single spore? The entire network. The network which is made up of mushrooms and tentacles. So I'll repeat this. Very good, Yasmin. it is modifying filigree. Hiranmai, it is not modifying fungus directly. It will not jump over a verb to modify fungus. It cannot modify fungus from that distance. You were not there in the session earlier, so we discussed that ed verbals can modify only the nearest noun or nearest noun phrase. So Yasmin has got the perfect answer. Spawned by is literally, if you see, spawned by is actually modifying filigree and all that comes with filigree. So it's not just modifying mushrooms. It's not just the mushrooms which are spawned. It is not just the tentacles which are spawned. It is the entire network which is made up of mushrooms and tentacles which is spawned by. Okay? Clear, guys? Are you clear here? All of you? Are you all clear, guys? Let me ask you the question. Are you clear, all of you? Are you clear? Great. Because once I move on, it will be very difficult to come back. All right. So I don't see any questions on this. Now comes the tricky part. Okay, a small percentage of you says no. Please ask your questions. Whoever is not clear about this portion, please ask your question right now. It will be very difficult to answer the question later on. It slows us all down. Shashank, you don't have to know the meaning of filigree. All you need to know is spawned by is next to a noun phrase. So it will modify the noun phrase. Yes, Deepak, prepositional phrase of can be ignored while identifying the modified entity and modifier pair. Rajavi, tentacles is not the only noun. It is joined by and mushrooms. And mushrooms and tentacles is a part of the broader picture. See, ask yourself, is only the tentacles are spawned, only the mushrooms are spawned, or both? And if both are spawned, they are part of what? The filigree. All right. Shashank, you don't have to think about logical sense. You have to think about the placement here. Okay. First of all, tentacles alone cannot be modified because there's a and. So technically speaking, mushrooms and tentacles, they are put together, they make one entity. Second is they are a modifier of filigree. So the whole thing is modified by spawned by. That is the way the placement works. Okay, Shashank? So Shashank, Rajavi, are we clear on this? And at the end of the day, all you need to remember is spawned by is a verbal. It is modifying the nouns, mushrooms and tentacles, even if you can't reach filigree. Are we clear, guys? Shall we move on? Great. Wonderful. So when you start practicing like this, gradually you will see that you get clarity on issues like this. And now, because I have a verbal here and then an and is there. Now remember, guys, again I'll repeat. This part is not an independent clause. So after this and, you will not have an independent clause, okay? What you can have two things. A giant fungus that is dash, 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 and then you will again have a that and some other relative pronoun clause, or you can have something which is parallel to spawned. So let's see what we have. And extending for more than 30 acres. So spawned by, so filigree spawned by something and filigree extending. So these two are verbals, okay? They are verbals. One is an ed verbal, the other is an ing verbal for noun filigree. Noun or noun phrase. Let me put it this way. Starting with filigree. So it's the entire network extending for. Because we don't have a that, it is not modifying giant fungus. If you wanted a modifier for giant fungus, then according to parallelism, the sentence should have been a giant fungus that is and that is extending. But because we don't have that another that, the extending is basically a verbal parallel to spawned by. And the takeaway is ed verbal and ing verbal can be parallel, guys. So the intended meaning is, if you have any questions, please put in the question box, chat box. Scientists have recently discovered what could be the largest organism. This organism is a giant fungus. It is a filigree of mushrooms and tentacles. This filigree was spawned by the spore thousands of years ago, and this filigree extends for more than 30 acres. So we have converted was spawned and extends both into verbals. One has become spawned by, the was is gone, and the other becomes extending, and they are parallel. The sentence is correct as it is. Okay. Yes, Shashank, we can. You just need to ask what spawned by. Now, spawned by anyways will not make sense, no? If you have a by after the verb, then the doer of the action is always in the passive voice. Ishan, we discussed this earlier in the session. You have to ask the simple question, what spawned, who spawned? Okay. So if you get a logical subject for that word, it's a verb, otherwise it's not a verb. Here we don't have anything which spawned by something. So are we clear, guys, on this question? Are we clear on this question? Are we all clear? You're welcome, Ishan. Are we all clear, guys? Great. I have a universal yes for that. Thank you. Great. So this is one of those classic questions, one of the most debated questions on GMAT Club, guys. So A is correct as it is. We don't need a verb. We need a verbal which is parallel to spawned. Okay. Extends is a simple present tense verb, and I've already explained we don't need a verb. Okay. The verb would have made sense only if you had that extends. Okay. So B is out. Extended, ambiguous. Okay. Why ambiguous? It could be a verb because we know extended can be a verb, simple past tense verb, simple past. But since the organism is still there, we can't use it as a verb. It won't be parallel. Okay. It could be a verbal also. But because of the ambiguity, we are not marking C as correct. Again, majority of you marked B and C. It extended, again, you're introducing a new clause, okay, by using it extended, not parallel, guys. All right. What extended? You're saying the filigree extended or the giant fungus extended? Because after and if you're using another it means you're introducing a new clause, and that wouldn't be parallel. Remember, you had an independent clause from here till here. This is independent clause. From here till here, what you have is a flexible modifier actually. All right. You can't have an independent clause after this. Is extending becomes a verb. Therefore, it is incorrect. Clear, guys? Are we all clear? So, Arindam, if you are going to introduce a clause that is, the next clause should also be and that extends. That is parallel. This is not parallel, okay? If you're going to introduce two relative pronoun clauses, both should be introduced with the help of that. So again, that is a topic for a different area altogether, and we again don't have time. Tense of extend. There is no word, Rajavi, there is no extend. Extends is simple present tense. How can we, Sumit is asking, how can we figure out when can ed verbal and ing verbal? Ed verbal and ing verbal is parallel if it is modifying a noun and modifying the same noun. Okay, Sumit? Because ed verbals don't modify a verb. So if you have a noun and if that ed verbal and ing verbal are modifying the same noun, then they are parallel. Are we clear? Are we all clear, guys? Shashank, where have you read this? A modifier can modify a faraway noun by jumping over a dependent clause if it acts as a modifier for the same noun. So, Shashank, what you're talking about is a non-essential modifier. We don't have a non-essential modifier here. If you have a modifier between two commas, and that is a clause, okay? If you have a modifier between two commas, which is a clause, then it can jump. Otherwise, it can't. All right, let's move to the next question. Flexible modifier mystery. So flexible modifier is what you guys call the noun plus noun modifier. Okay, it's the same thing. Uh, let's quickly understand it. It can modify both nouns and verbs, but unlike all other noun modifiers, it can be placed far away from the entity they are modifying. Look at these examples. Harry has graduated from Cambridge. An achievement. The achievement is basically modifying the main verb has graduated. Okay, it's not modifying university, it is not modifying economics, it is modifying the action has graduated. The action is an achievement. So you had the giant fungus, that is, it was modifying organism which is placed far away. Harry has graduated from Cambridge University. Now you're modifying with a flexible modifier the noun Cambridge University, which is also not next to it. Okay, typical format of a flexible modifier, I'm saying typical, you have a noun entity, for in this case an achievement, and then you have the noun modifier that sets him apart. What kind of achievement? That sets him apart from his contemporaries. Okay, similarly in the second case, institution is a noun and then you have the modifier for institution. That's a typical format. Do make a note, guys. Flexible modifiers are not connected to the sentence with the help of a connector. You will not find a flexible modifier and a main clause connected with an and. It will always be separated with a comma. Okay. Here is a question for you. It's not a very difficult question. It's more to do with the discussion of a flexible modifier. So go ahead, guys. All right, guys, I am now going to start my countdown. So please ensure you have put in your polls. Here goes. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. All right, Shashank. Just give me a moment. Let me finish the discussion for this question. Like the great navigators who first sailed around the earth, gathering information about its size and the curvature of its surface, astronomers have made new observations that show its darkening. So, Shashank, like that entire dependent clause, okay, that is basically drawing a comparison between Shashank, actually you've got the structure wrong. Like is used for a comparison between navigators and astronomers. Who first sailed till surface is basically a relative pronoun clause for navigators. So what you really have is a noun being compared to another noun. All right. So the first part is the relative pronoun clause is a dependent clause. All right. And then you have an independent clause. So I'm going to discuss that later. Let me end the poll here. All right. 12% of you marked B as the correct answer. 43% of you have marked C. 12% have marked D and 31% have marked E. I'll be a little quick, guys. In the interests of time, we still have two wonderful questions starting with that, and which, if not possible, I'll discuss at least one question. So here goes. The researchers compared something, okay. You have a body of researchers and they compared something. They compared unnecessary medical service claims for so many patients. And then we've got a modifier for patients who were on traditional plans. So these researchers, subject, verb is compared. They compared, okay, claims, all right, for certain kind of patients with. So they compared these claims, let's call them claim 1, okay, with claim 2. Claims filed for so many patients. Now these are different kinds of patients. So basically they compared the claims for two different kinds of patients. One type was who were on traditional plans, and then you have who switched from a traditional plan. And now if you're switching, it should be from one plan to another plan. So that's incorrect. A is incorrect. Okay. So the researchers compared two different kinds of claims for different kinds of patients. A study accounted for. Now, from here till here, if you see, we have an independent clause. And then if you read this part, a study accounted for patient characteristics, okay, and characteristics including something, 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 and something. So study becomes a subject, this becomes a verb, and this becomes an independent clause. Can I join two independent clauses with a comma, guys? Can I have independent clause, comma, independent clause? No. Right? So a study accounted for has to be some sort of a flexible modifier or something else. So when I'm reading this sentence, I don't know straight away how this will be restructured, but I do know that the first portion seems to be fine, but the second portion has to be reconnected in some other way. But if I have to draw a relationship between the first clause and the second clause, what will I do? A study accounted for patient characteristics. So which study are we talking about? Well, the researchers compared two kinds of claims. So maybe that is the study that we are talking about, the comparison that the researchers studied. All right, maybe. So I'm thinking to myself, the researchers compared two kinds of claims, okay? And this study that compared such claims took into consideration different characteristics, which included something, something, something. All right, this is what I'm thinking. Clear, guys? Can you see your mistake? Some of you got that wrong. So Rohan, if I use an and also, it will be wrong. Why? Because if I use an and, it simply means there are two different clauses just joined by an and. But I think what you meant was, if you want to join two independent clauses, you need an and. However, one second, guys. I just took a quick swig of water. So I was saying that I was telling Rohan that you can't, in this case, you can't join with an and, because you have to draw a relationship, a connection between study and the previous clause. Okay. So let's see. A is wrong, as I've already pointed out. You basically have an independent clause, comma, independent clause, which is wrong. Come to B. All right. Who switched from, oh, by the way, in A, the and is also incorrect. In B, from a traditional plan to a consumer directed health plan is fine, but this part is still the same. All right. So you still have independent clause, comma, independent clause. So B is out. Then if we come to C, who switched from this to this, okay, a study that. So here you have a noun plus you have a noun modifier. Okay, and this study is referring to what the researchers did. All right, C is correct actually. So as far as I can see in the polls, 43% of you got it right, and good. This was a simple example of a flexible modifier. A tougher example would be the giant fungus question. So let me quickly finish this discussion. D joins the two clauses with and, but then you see it becomes an independent clause with no connection. We are just saying the researchers compared something, 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 and a study accounted for patients. So whether what the researchers compared and the study is the same, we don't know. So D is incorrect because no logical connection between the two independent clauses. So D is out. E, again you're saying health plan which accounted for patient characteristics. The health plan did not account for patient characteristics. It is the study that accounted for patient characteristics, and the study refers to what the researchers have compared. So E is also out. So after going through the ED dilemma, the ING confusion, and the flexible modifier conundrum. Conundrum also means a puzzle. We are now going to look at the that and which conundrum. Sorry, this is the conundrum is basically a puzzle. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you have been often confused about the usage of that and which. Here is a question for you. Get started, guys. All the best. Three, two, and 1. So by the looks of it, most of you seem to have got this question right. And I would like to think that you have somehow been helped with the session so far. Did you guys find the session helpful, guys, while you were answering this question? You can answer me in the chat box. Did you find the first part of the session, the session so far, did you find that it helped you answer this question? So Jay, we will talk about that also. Jay, you are referring to the previous question E, right? The point is, Jay, that sometimes in GMAT, you might get an answer choice which is grammatically correct, but it is not per the intended meaning. Such a question is considered incorrect. All right, Jay? Thank you, Julia, for that vote of confidence. Wonderful. Carla, Vibhor, Jay, Hiranmai, Sunny, Rohan, Sumit, Rajavi, Julia, Shashank, Yasmin, Arindam. Thank you so much for that. And I really, really hope sincerely, with all my heart, that today when you go back to your GMAT preparation and when you're solving questions based on modifiers, you will definitely will have more clarity over your question. Great. Let's quickly get into this. So look at the way I break and read. And again, I'm pointing out that how to break and read, where to break and read, what questions to ask, how to be able to understand what is parallel to what. All these things are taught very slowly, very patiently, using the same format, because the entire thing I have made, and I know that in and out, every solution is written out like this. So if you want to master this approach, all you need to do is follow that approach. Look at the solutions which are written according to this approach and master your approach. Let's go on. About 5 million acres in the US. All right. So we're talking about these acres where in the US. All right. This is a modifying phrase. So this is my subject here. 5 million acres have been invaded. Okay. We are talking about a situation. All right. And for those of you who say passive voice is not preferred, please see, this is passive voice only. 5 million acres have been invaded. Okay, so something has broken into these 5 million acres. Let's see what. By a leafy spurge. So I'm thinking this must be some sort of a plant, since we're saying leafy spurge. All right, okay. And then you have a noun phrase, a herbaceous plant. Okay, so this herbaceous plant is modifying leafy spurge, and this plant is from Eurasia with milky sap. Now there's a bit of a confusion here. Is Eurasia with milky sap, or is it the plant with milky sap? More likely the plant with milky sap. All right, and this is okay. You can have two prepositional phrases modifying the same noun one after the other. There is nothing wrong with that. Like you can have a noun, then you can have one prepositional phrase which is modifying this noun, then you can immediately have another prepositional phrase modifying the same noun. So nothing wrong here. A herbaceous plant is modifying leafy spurge. From Eurasia is modifying plant. With milky sap is also modifying plant. So we can remove this. All right, great. So far we have a description of the leafy spurge. That gives mouth sores to cattle. Now if you see, that is placed next to milky sap, right? So this that is referring to, then we are basically saying, sorry, sap that gives mouth sores to cattle. So sap is the subject, gives is the verb. So this milky sap gives mouth sores to cattle. All right, we are okay with all of this so far. All right, 5 million acres have been invaded by a leafy spurge, and we have this spurge, which is a plant from Eurasia. The plant has milky sap that gives mouth sores to cattle. So far I'm fine. Also notice, this is from here till here you have, so you can't call all of this non-essential. All right, because you have a relative pronoun clause here. So we are going to remove this from here. Displacing grasses. Now see, you have a comma plus ing. So this will modify the nearest verb. This is the nearest verb, right? Okay. So basically we are saying sap that gives mouth sores to cattle, and by giving mouth sores to cattle, sap is displacing grasses and other cattle food. Does it make sense? Does it make sense, guys, to say the sap is displacing the grasses? Thank you so much for that, Rohan, Jay, Julia. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Julia, this really made my day. Rohan, Jay, and Julia. So Kabir, I don't know which one you're talking about without any connector in between. You don't need a connector between a flexible modifier, if that is what you meant. Okay, guys, my question, let me repeat, I forgot. So here displacing is modifying gives mouth sores to cattle. Does it make sense to say sap gives mouth sores to cattle? That is fine. But by giving mouth sore to cattle, it is displacing the grass. Kabir, we can put two prepositions back to back without a connector. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. Yes. Does it make sense to say the sap is displacing grasses, guys? Because the ing verbal that is modifying the verb also has to make sense with the doer of the action. No, right? No. No, says Shashank. No, says Arindam. The others, what do you think is displacing the grasses, guys? Hi, Spandan. You're right. Sap displacing grasses doesn't make sense. So what is displacing grasses, by the way? If we try to understand the question, what is displacing the grasses? Very good, Arindam. The leafy spurge is displacing the grasses actually. Yes, Kabir. The plant which is the leafy spurge is displacing the grasses. Yes, Anish, absolutely. So here we have a problem. There is a lack of logic between the modifier and the modified entity. Yes, Ekra, Carla, Sandeep, absolutely. So the invasion is done by the leaf, and therefore it is the leaf which is taking place of the grasses. Okay. Further down we have and rendering rangeland worthless. So it seems displacing and rendering are both going with sap gives mouth source. So we are basically saying sap, okay, gives source, and the outcome is displacing and rendering, which is illogical. Sorry, guys. All right. So this is the part which is very, very incorrect. That is modifying sap and it is not making sense. So modified entity and modifier do not agree logically. Golden rules. All right. Intended meaning was about 5 million acres in the US have been invaded by leafy spurge. This leafy spurge is a herbaceous plant from Eurasia. The plant has milky sap that gives mouth source to cattle. So far, so good. The plant, that is the leafy spurge, displaces grasses and other cattle food. This displacement leaves the rangeland worthless. Okay. See how smooth that becomes if you're breaking and reading your sentences and asking questions on the way and trying to make sense of all of it. Wonderful. Great. All of you seem to have understood it is the leaf which is displacing. So A is incorrect as pointed out, guys. All right. Milky sap that gives mouth source to cattle, displacing grasses is incorrect. Let's move to B. Most of you have marked B as the correct answer, which is why I basically asked, did the session help you? 57% of you have marked B and you are right. B is the correct answer. 25% of you had marked A, but I think that was a small miss over there, and I hope you have understood where you went wrong. So in B, if you see, we are saying acres have been invaded by the leafy spurge, a herbaceous plant from Eurasia. If you see, this is a non-essential modifier here. This again is a non-essential modifier here. So this whole thing basically AR, this non-essential modifier. Now, the that or which, I think one of you asked me a question about this earlier. All right. This that can now modify leafy spurge because a non-essential modifier should be imagined as not existent when you are reading a sentence. So what we are really saying here is 5 million acres have been invaded by leafy spurge that gives mouth source to cattle and displaces. So leafy spurge gives mouth source to cattle, leafy spurge displaces grasses, and by giving mouth source to cattle and displacing grasses, the leafy spurge is rendering the rangeland worthless. Perfect. B is correct. We are basically saying leafy spurge. Okay. All right. We are using the relative pronoun modifier that gives and displaces, comma, rendering. So rendering is modifying displaces. It also makes sense with leafy spurge, and we are good to go. Let me see. Yes, gives and displaces are parallel. Because here it is the part of the same relative pronoun clause, Arindam. So Arindam, we are talking about over there, we had a lot of data in between and therefore it was not parallel. But over here, it's a part of the same relative pronoun. Okay. Over there, it was not. We had spawned by in between. All right. Sandeep, that will be followed by a noun if that is a connector. Sudeep, sorry. In a relative pronoun clause, that will always be followed by a verb. Sudeep. So Arindam and Sudeep, are you clear? Sudeep, once again, let me repeat. That is always followed by a verb if we are using a relative pronoun clause. So Arindam, let me explain. In the giant fungus question, before extending, you had a modifier spawned by, right? Therefore, the confusion was, is extending parallel to spawned by, or is it parallel to that is? Because of the confusion, that was incorrect. All right, Arindam? In this case, there is no confusion. There is nothing in between. Gives mouth sores and displaces. All right? Great. Wonderful. Sudeep, a relative pronoun clause will always have a verb after that and who and when. So, Sudeep, I don't understand whether... Okay, let's look at this. If I say a leafy spurge that is invading the acres, okay? Now, that is invading the acres is a relative pronoun clause that will modify leaf, but is basically a verb for leafy spurge only. So this is the structure of a relative pronoun clause which is being followed here. That is referring to leafy spurge because this is a non-essential modifier. The part which I have crossed off is a non-essential modifier. It's like a modifier within brackets because it is separated by commas. Sudeep, are you clear? So comma is preceding that. It's like a bracket, Sudeep. Yes, Sudeep, we can. Non-essential modifiers are separated from the clause with the help of comma pair. A comma at the beginning and the comma at the end. And you are supposed to make sense of your sentence without that particular modifier, a non-essential modifier. Okay, Sudeep? So let's quickly move to C, guys. Here we are saying same problem. Sap that gives mouth sores. This is wrong. And displacing. What is it parallel to? God knows. And then you again have rendering here. What is rendering modifying? Because we don't have a verb next to it. The verb that is there is this one. So that means the sap is rendering the range ant worthless, which means C is out. D, you don't even have a verb. No verb for acres. Because having been invaded by leafy spurge is not a verb. Okay? And then you don't have... If you don't have a verb there, you don't really have a sentence. And again, you have sap that gives mouth sores. To catch sap that displaces grasses and sap renders. So D is out. It seems everything is being done by the sap only, which doesn't make sense. And E, you're saying same thing again. No verb for acres. No verb here. And then you have milky sap giving mouth sores and displacing grasses and then rendering. So again, wrong. Are we clear are we clear about this, guys? Yes, Julia. Ideally, if the sentence construction is correct, when you take out the non-essential modifiers, your sentence should not change. Your sentence should make the same. The meaning should remain the same. Perfect. All right, great, guys. So we have a last question. If you are, I'll take a poll on that. Do you guys want to do that last question, or we can call it quits here? Sorry, guys. Let me ask the poll. I have asked the wrong poll. Yes. Do you want to do the question, guys? There's a poll out there. If you want to do the question, okay. I'm just going to go by the polls, guys. So you have 10 seconds. If you want to solve that one more question, please say yes. If you don't want to solve, you can mark no. And I am going to select based on the majority. Majority seem to want it. Sudeep will have dinner. That doing that correct. Okay, Sudeep. So guys, I guess most of you do want it. Sorry about the others who don't want it. Sorry guys to delay your dinner. You can bring your food and just have it in front of the laptop if you want. I'm okay with that. Don't worry. I think all the food will get digested with all these modifiers going around and around in your head. All right, guys. Quickly, I'm going to be real quick about it. Here's the question, guys. I'll do a very, very quick analysis of the question. Okay, guys. So I'll quickly start my countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So Julia says, you remember this question. Okay. Great, Julia. So I hope you got that right. Let's hope that. I'm pretty sure you did get that right. So guys, I'm going to end the poll. And the poll seem to be moving even now. And just hold on for another 5 minutes. I'm going to share the PDF of this session with you so that you can go over it again. And I would love to have your feedback. So here goes my analysis, guys. Let me end the poll. None of you believe A is correct, which it is not. B, 12% of you believe B is correct. 4% of you believe C is correct. 70% of you believe D is correct. 12% believe it's E. So let's quickly go through and see what is correct and why. All right. Over the next few years, so clearly we are talking about a time frame. This time frame is going to definitely modify the upcoming verb. Time frames always modify verbs. Increasing demand. So this here is my subject. The noun is demands. On the Chattahoochee River is basically a modifier for the demands. Let's see what about these demands. Which flows into the Apalachicola River. This again is a non-essential modifier for Chattahoochee River. So we still don't have a verb for increasing demands. Could alter. Okay, here we have the verb for demand. So these increasing demands could alter the salty or saline content of the bay. All right. So far that we're talking about the next few years, upcoming years, these increasing demands, they could change the salt content of this bay. All right. So what? We have a comma there, which means we can expect some sort of outcome of this alteration coming after it. Which would rob the oysters? Now, which we know which would rob, this is a relative pronoun clause. Okay, and it should modify the nearest noun. All right, or it can jump over a small prepositional phrase to modify the noun. Now the only two nouns that we have next to which, one is the bay, and even if we ignore this prepositional phrase, which can jump to content. But did the content rob the oysters of the flavor? Did the bay rob the oysters of the flavor? No. It is the change, the altering of the saline that robbed the oysters of the flavor. So we know that which cannot modify, alter because it's a verb. All right. So, but we know that we need to have a verb modifier here, possibly something like, which could alter the content, robbing the oysters there of their flavor. And to make them, so which would rob the oysters, so this altering the saline content would rob the oysters of their flavor and would make the oysters decrease in size. So this is not parallel for obvious reasons. Would make the oysters go small in size, less distinctive and less in demand. So this make them is not parallel to these two, not parallel here also. So I'm thinking, okay, the Chattahoochee River flows into the Apalachicola River. Over the next few years, increasing demands on the Chattahoochee River could alter the saline content of the bay. This altering of the saline content would rob the oysters of their flavor. The oysters would then become smaller in size. Now, smaller is, if you see, this is parallel, smaller, less, less. Smaller in size, less distinctive, less in demand. Okay? Take a moment to let that sink in. Yes, Sudeep, please go and have your dinner. Don't worry. Absolutely. Okay. So with that understanding, we know that A is incorrect. All right. A is incorrect because which is modifying a verb, and that is not correct. B, and it. Now this it will refer to what? This it will refer to, let's see. And it would rob the oysters. Now it is what? The saline content, or is it the bay? Because it cannot refer to the verb alter. It is a pronoun, right? It can only refer to, and it cannot refer to demands because demands is plural. All right. And here we are saying it. So the content would rob the oysters there of their flavor. The content would make them smaller. All right. And then you have two verbs, rob and make. No connector. No connector between these two verbs. So many reasons why B is incorrect. C, again, and rob. So rob is a verb here. Okay. What is the subject, guys? Let's see. So if I have and rob, the subject will have to be increasing demands. Increasing demands could alter the saline content, and increasing demands rob. So this is, but then the demands don't rob the oysters there of their flavor. And of course, making them decrease in size, that means the demands make the oysters decrease in size, which is also wrong. So C is out. D is the correct answer. Comma plus ing. If I have a comma plus ing, this is modifying could alter. All right. So robbing is modifying could alter. So increasing demands could alter the saline content of the bay. And by doing this, robbing the oysters there of their flavor and making them smaller. So robbing and making them smaller are parallel. Absolutely. And both of them are modifying, altering the saline content. So by altering the saline content, the oysters would lose flavor, would become smaller, would become less distinctive and less in demand. D is correct. E, robbing the oysters there of their flavor and making them decrease. This is not parallel to these two. Making them decrease in size is more like, how shall I put it, ing phrase, whereas less distinctive and less in demand is simply you have the comparative adjectives. So ideally comparative adjectives, making them smaller, less distinctive and less in demand would be parallel. So this is incorrect. All right, guys. Are we all clear here? Any queries? So Kabir, how come they are parallel? What is parallel, Kabir? So smaller is a comparative adjective, less is a comparative adjective, therefore they are all parallel. Smaller, less distinctive, less in demand. Out of all the choices, Sudeep, yeah, correct answer is D, yes. So Kabir, any queries here? I did not get your query, Kabir. Can you just clearly ask? In the meantime, guys, I'll start sharing the PDF of this. And I have a small task for you guys. There is a poll there. I would love your feedback on that poll, your ratings. So making them decrease in size, making the oysters decrease. So the oysters are decreasing the size or what? It sounds weird, right? We are basically saying that something is making the oysters go small. You're welcome, Carla. I also loved having all of you on this session. And I'm so glad you've gained confidence in answering the SC questions. Thank you, Arindam, there. Let me start sharing the session PDF with you guys. If you look to your left, and let me also bring up the takeaways, guys. This is important. You can take a screenshot of this if you want, so that you will remember it. These are the various takeaways that we got from our. You're welcome, Rajavi. I'm so glad you liked the sessions. Oh yes, Carla, I will definitely. Next week, I think I have another session on sentence correction only, solving 700 level questions. Thank you, Jay, so much. You're welcome, Shubham. All of you guys, thank you so much. I hope you guys can see the PDF that I'm sharing and you can download it. You're welcome, Anish. So guys, once again, want to remind all of you about the crash course starting from tomorrow if you're interested in it. All right. I'll just bring that up. So Rohan, CR, I think CR will be, I'm going to have a session on CR on the 16th of July. Looking forward to seeing you again, Carla. And if any of you want to talk to our strategy expert, you can book a call that will be free of cost. I'm just going to give you the link for that call. Just give me a moment. There's also a free trial version that you can try on, guys. So let me just give you the links one by one. I'm going to pin the free trial version in the sticky message right at the top. The free trial version of our course, the link to it I have given at the top of the chat box. And I'm also going to give you the link to book a counseling session. You can talk to a strategy expert on Calendly. So here's the link. I have posted the link to schedule a call with a strategy expert if any of you have any issues or any queries that you want to ask. So Rajavi, the tip for managing time for verbal is to first master the approach. First learn how you're going to solve the query. So your concepts, yes. The approach, meaning-based approach, whether it is CR, RC or SC. You practice that. While practicing, don't think about time. Once you have got the approach absolutely correct, then start decreasing the time 10 seconds at a time. All of you, you're welcome. Thank you so much for your thanks, guys. So, Sashank, which link are you talking about? There will be an L, which is, hold on a sec, I'll copy the link again. Maybe I haven't copied it properly. See, just give me a moment. Sashank, I think now you will get the link. The L was missing in the free trial link. It's now, it will open now. Sudeep, try it out. Try it out, guys. My bad. I'm so sorry. The L was missing from the link and that is why it was not opening. I think now you'll be able to access it. Can you access the link now, guys? Wonderful. All of you guys, I really hope you get a grip on this and make sure that you follow the intended meaning approach. Unless and until you're following that approach, things won't improve, guys. You can connect with us, or you can write to us at support@gmatwiz.com, or you can connect with us on that WhatsApp number also if you want to. Thank you. Okay, great. Ashok says the link is working. I think I gave the wrong link. So once again, the two links that I've shared with you, one is to try out the free trial version of the course. The other is to book a strategy call with our strategy expert. So Piyush himself has taken the GMAT and scored a 740. And he is really the expert when it comes to strategy. So if you are facing any issues, or if you want any further data or clarification on the course, you can ask him. Any other questions? Let me quickly see. So Rajavi, please get your strategy together. Wonderful, guys. So thank you so much for all your cooperation, for sitting out so late with me, missing your dinner for some of you. I don't see any more queries. So now I think you can happily return to your dinner tables. Bon appetit, guys. I'm going to end the session now. I hope all of you all have downloaded your I hope all of you all have downloaded the PDF version, guys. Yes, if you have, then wishing all of you a very good night. See you again next Friday. You're welcome, Julia. Nice to see you guys. I was like pleasantly surprised to see you after a long time now. Good night, guys. And a good day for those of you who are starting your day.